Alrighty. It looks like everything is working as it should. Nazeris, give me a mic check, please.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. I see your audio. I hear your audio. Chat, if you can just let me know if everything is loud enough for both Nazeris and I, pardon me, pick up on your end. But it looks like on my end, it looks loud enough. Looks good to go. Eminent Shadow, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Good to see you this evening. So yeah, everybody, welcome to episode 47. I think I did the math right. Every time I have to go back and look at the most recent one that I uploaded to YouTube. But yeah, welcome to episode 47 of the Pathfinders podcast. We are your hosts. I am Tree0311 here with my partner in crime.
Hello, everyone. I am Nazeris at the Nova Forge.
And we are the Pathfinders, and we are charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen and its development. So yeah, this evening, we have not done an episode in over 2 weeks. I think it was over 2 weeks ago when we did the last one, or maybe longer. I'm trying to remember. It's been a couple weeks just because I've had a lot going on transitioning.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Oh, and Walker 300, thank you for the 6-month sub. Really appreciate you.
Amazing.
Thanks for joining us this evening. But yeah, I finished if you remember, I was in San Antonio for one course with the Army for 2 months, and I graduated from that on like mid-May. I forget when I went home now. And I think it was the 19th. Yeah. And graduated from that, got to go home for 4 days, and then now I'm halfway through another course with the Army, and I'm at Fort Novacell, used to be known as Fort Rucker in southern Alabama. So this is geographically the closest that Nazeris and I have ever been to each other.
So far.
Yeah, so far. Until we get to meet up at CitizenCon someday. We'll make it happen. But, yeah, so... yeah, well, hopefully. We
always shoot for next year. Just like Squadron's always 2 years away. We'll always meet next CitizenCon.
Yeah. But this evening, so since our last episode, we have had 2 Roadmap Roundups. The progress tracker has imploded. Much like many other things to do with Star Citizen. But we have gotten some really good information from the Roadmap Roundups. And then Shiny Hobo, who just gave me a follow a few minutes ago, a very active member of my Discord and the Astropub Discord, the creator of the of ShinyTracker.app and the 2 reports over there. He has a new tool called the... brain fart. Let me pull it up.
Is it not just timeline?
It's the scheduled work timeline, which is on ShinyTracker.app. Yeah.
I remember seeing timeline. Scheduled work timeline, yeah.
Yeah, timeline something or other. Very specific. Yeah. So yeah, we've got the May 17th and May 31st Roadmap Roundups. We've got the timeline, which is actually the only way to see the progress tracker right now, via a third-party tool. Thank you, Shiny Hobo, for keeping that backed up. You're not the hero we deserved, but the hero we needed.
Absolutely.
Let's just say that. And then Nazeris, you have a what do you want to call it?
It is an index of going to be all of the monthly reports and all of the roadmap roundups. So currently, I am most of the way through 2021. So from start to mid 2021, every single roadmap update and lists everything that changed.
Nice. Yeah, and the reason that's important is because if you've watched any of these podcasts, you know that Nazeris and I, we get a lot of their information from using like Starchives to search the videos from CIG over the years, using key terms and such. But also, we search through the monthly reports and the updates to the roadmap, as well as things like Jump Point, other sources of information. But like our like our trifecta, our triangle of sources of information is really roadmap, progress tracker, monthly reports, and the videos, the things we use most. And so having a index that is easy to search, to get information and search for key terms, keywords, and stuff, for what we do, and really for anybody who wants to stay up on the development of Star Citizen and Squadron 42, having that information on a searchable, usable, viewable index is it's a big deal for when it comes to finding the information you're looking for. Like for example, I can't tell you how many times I have had to, just because I forget to bookmark it, or once you have 100 Star Citizen bookmarks, good luck, wading your way through them. But the Roadmap Roundup update for when the Legionnaire was removed from the progress tracker, or when the Apollo was removed from the progress tracker, because those are two examples of things that were, ships that are popular. They were removed from the progress tracker before they were going into development, and CIG gave a reason for why they were removed when they put those out there. And so going back, being able to search for, okay, here's the index, search for Apollo, and then pull that up. Okay, it was this Roadmap Roundup on this date, and then click screenshot send, to whoever wants that information. The Legionnaire, when it was removed, it was due to a Squadron 42 dependency. Hacking. But I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back and manually search for that, because it's, difficult to do so. And then also this evening, we have part 1 of a 2-part Spectrum Pulse. And if you... What's that?
I just figured out something that Excel does that's going to make it so good to use this tool. Sorry.
Light bulb.
Yeah. Because of how I did all of the things into the spreadsheet. When you search something, hit find all, it tells you what state for which tile.
Okay.
So you can instantly go to when it was added, which delay, or when it was removed, just by looking at the value in the cell.
Oh, perfect.
That is this tool is going to be OP, and I didn't even know it was going to be this OP. I love it.
I'm going to take credit for that. So that was me. You're welcome.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Why was it you?
No, whatever you just did, that was my idea. Yeah.
Okay. Excel is conservatively /. I know, right? I love Excel. Excel is one of my favorite.
But yeah, we're on top of the roadmap stuff. Naz, did you just freeze?
No, why?
Looks like your camera froze.
It's Paul Shelley-itis you having?
Yeah, it's frozen on VDO as well.
Bloop 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 bloop. Oh no, yeah, it's OBS. Never mind. Bloop bloop.
Yep.
Bloop, bloop.
While you're troubleshooting that, there you are. Now you're moving again. I was like, he's holding that pose really well.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Yeah. Did you try hitting it? So yeah, we also have a Spectrum Pulse. If you remember, our Spectrum Pulses are where, Nazeris, we try to keep our fingers, on the pulse of the community, and Spectrum stuff. But it's also more of along the lines of the theme of, Pathfinders, and that we're, sending out a pulse, into the spectrum of the verse in order to see what radar returns, or scanning returns come up, and then we'll dig down into that information.
Yeah, nothing to do with going to Spectrum, because we never go there.
Yeah, try to avoid it. But it's like, we have the little bots in our Discords for, trolling for dev posts on Spectrum. So, that's the, if the devs are posting and people are replying, we try to keep an eye on those conversations. And one thing that I've seen lots of rumblings about as of late is resource management and engineering, and how those things are going to work. And so I wanted to do a sort of comprehensive segment on all things resource management and engineering, and really to get that started, especially if you're newer to the project or if it's not something that you've been following, we really have to talk about components first. And so tonight we're going to talk about components and subcomponents, and that's why it's called component therapy. It's actually a dad joke play on words because of what I do for a living. Component therapy is when I give 1 unit of packed red blood cells and 1 unit of fresh frozen plasma and 1 unit of platelets to a person who is receiving resuscitation after having significant hemorrhage. And so it's something we talk about a lot in the Army, and something I've been doing recently in training. So I was like, oh, okay, there's a play on words name that I can use.
That's why you're going through all this training, to get all the new resources for dad jokes.
Yes, that's the main reason for it is for dad jokes. It's I got to have multiple sources for dad jokes. It can't just be video games and nerd culture. EPAV07, good to see you.
Got a unique pool of resources for dad jokes.
Yeah, you got to keep it fresh. So you got to pull things from different places. So this evening, part 1 of the Spectrum Pulse component therapy, Nazeris took on the component section. So we're going to be looking at a couple of the resources from CIG, and some little clips and stuff regarding components in order to just sort of give a primer on what the different components that ships, vehicles, and eventually, some of these things will be used in locations as well, like outposts and habs, but also physical locations like stations and such. But what those components, those individual components are, and what their function is. And then I'm going to be talking about what we know regarding subcomponents, because each component has subcomponents that are kind of like, if you have been playing Diablo 4 and you get, like a legendary weapon and it's got the, spots to, put runes or gemstones or whatever in it. And the subcomponents are essentially consumable modifiers to those components. So we're going to talk about what CIG has said about those, what their plans are, and what hints we have towards the development of those. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you hear about where CIG is with components and ships and subcomponents within those components. So yeah, that's what we've got going on this evening. And this also serves as a primer for the next episode of Armchair Admirals and Generals, in which the hope is that myself, Night Cobb, and Sergeant Tickles can get together and talk about what CIG, how what CIG is doing with components and subcomponents relates back to real-world military operations in terms of engineering, but also in terms of customizing. I don't know if customizing is the right word, but customizing or modifying different vehicles to do different jobs or have different performance characteristics. So I'm hoping that we can get together. Probably won't be next week, but hopefully sometime in June is the plan we're working out right now. So let's get started with the Roadmap Roundup, and I'll transition us into our viewing screen. 1 second, let me make sure it's pulled up and looking right.
Okay, that needs to be on a different window.
Okay, cool. That's correct. All right, transitioning in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, so our first Roadmap Roundup for this evening is the one from May 17th. And Nazeris is taking care of a few last-minute touches to the notes, and so I'm going to read through this and talk about these things while he's finishing those up. Roadmap Roundup, May 17th, 2023. Actually, here, let me make this bigger so I can see it. Okay. Alrighty, so happy Wednesday, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the Roadmap Roundup with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who helped to make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup, CIG Community Team. Let's see. So, notable changes for May 17th, 2023. So this is particularly exciting for me because I remember when this was announced, actually first announced on Twitter. Progress Tracker, Vehicle Content, MTL. With this published, we're adding a new team to the Progress Tracker that you may have seen mentioned in recent monthly reports. Vehicle Content MTL, or MTLVC for short. This team is based in Montreal, and much like the other two vehicle content teams, is comprised of artists and designers, and they'll be working on bringing the vehicles of Star Citizen to life. Additionally, with our next publish, we'll be starting to add the Q4 2023 schedule and its deliverables for upstream teams. If you watched the SCL from not yesterday, but last week, the all vehicle SCL, which was just full of really good information. I saw some people making comments and sort of blowing it off a little bit because some of it was, repeating things that we had heard before. But as long as it isn't a question, that's can I slave these to the pilot? Can these be operated by AI Blade? Stupid things that we've heard over and over and over again, generic things. As long as it's them reiterating and expanding or expounding on things that we haven't heard about in a while, it's good information because it gives it, because sometimes they'll give updates, or they'll provide additional information. And so it might not all be new, but it's also, even if it's not all new, it's all confirmatory, which is a good thing, So we're not left wondering, hey, has this changed? And so one thing related to this that came out of that SCL is when they talked about what vehicles are in production, what things are going in production. One of the things that John Cruz said is that the Montreal vehicle team has 4 artists and a designer. The designer is actually on his way back to Montreal, and so it'll be a team of 5. And they started work in April. Those 4 artists already have started work. And so they've already actually have been working for 2 months. And they're working on what John Cruz said. He said they are working on 2 variants of an existing ship. He didn't say vehicle, he said ship. Now, sometimes they misspeak and they just say ship, vehicle, vehicle, ship. So it could be a ground vehicle. We don't know. But we do know that the 2 things that are on the Progress Tracker under the Montreal vehicle team are both variants of something that is already existing. And so I made a quick video speculating about that and made it in relation to the Tumbril Storm, which is in concept, and they also confirmed that it is actually well into production in that same SCL. It's actually well into gray box, and in some places is in art already, I think is what was said.
Yep, and you can see it in the latest sneak peek.
Yeah, yep. It's the cockpit. Yeah.
It's very
meant boat for sure. Yeah, definitely a boat.
Boat
most likely,
I mean,
Star Citizen's equivalent of a aluminum boat with an outboard motor for fishing in the shallow waters of the shorelines around Lake Hurston. So yeah, definitely a boat for fishing, or if you're going looking for turtles, But yeah. So yeah, if you haven't watched that SCL, I highly encourage going back and checking that out. Even if you just go to that first comment in the bottom and look at the timestamps and find the information you're looking for, or you watch a summary, it's good information. Don't miss out on it. Lots of stuff that's worth taking note of in there. So, it'll be interesting to see what else gets added to the Montreal plate, and how those sprints that are already on there get expanded upon or what comes next for them. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is they talked a lot about the vehicle pipeline. And if you're a follower of the podcast, you'll know that you may remember that Nazeris and I did a big spectrum pulse on... Something just made a loud noise in my hotel room. We did a big spectrum pulse back in, I think it was December, when it was shortly after John Cruz said that it would take a year to 18 months to make the Polaris, which people misquoted and took that quote wildly out of context, especially not knowing how the pipeline works and how production works, and just absolutely ran with it. And so Nazeris and I did a big spectrum pulse back then on the vehicle pipeline and why people's expectations for how long the backlog, especially of capital ships, why their speculations were wildly out of context and horribly inaccurate. It was a fun episode. We had a lot of good information, but that coupled with the episode that we did on the Building 100 Star Systems, talking about how CIG builds these pipelines and builds tools and, the workflows and then adds more people to the team, grows the team in order to increase throughput. It's a process that CIG does across the game. And so they talked a lot about that in that SCL. And one of the other things that they mentioned was that they are adding more vehicle teams. And so they already have the really big vehicle team in Manchester. They've got another one that's not nearly as big, but that one's in Los Angeles, Santa Monica. They're adding 2 more vehicle teams that they've been growing their team in Manchester that they have already, and then they're going to build 2 more teams in Manchester as part of their extended growth plans in Manchester on top of the one that they just built in Montreal. So the throughput for making vehicles is going to be going up over the next year dramatically. And people are like, oh God, how long is it going to take, them to get them spun up and actually making vehicles? And it's like, this team for Montreal, I first heard about this, the guy who's leading it, who got picked to run the team, took the job just a couple months ago. Like, it was back in like February or whatever. It was in the first quarter of this year because he tweeted about it when he accepted the job offer. And so if you follow a lot of the devs, you knew about that beforehand. And within a couple of months, they already had the team formed and they're starting work already on 2 new variants. And so if you remember when they made the announcement about the Montreal team that there is building, that they are building they're using to build the everything within Star Systems, and how long that team took to get built up. And that team is nearing 100 people now, and it's 2 years old. And we've already seen what they have been doing with building tools and then making locations from the tools. They are just going like gangbusters. So a lot of the doom and gloom of like, oh, it's going to take forever to get them working. And it's like, there's no evidence of that. There's zero evidence of them taking, is it going to take months? Yeah. If it's a larger team, it's going to take months for them to get spun up. But, the bigger the team, the longer it's going to take for them to get rolling. But as they're hiring people, those people will get started learning the tricks of the trade and learning the tools and getting things into production. Just like this small team is already already working. Within 3 months, they're already working on variants. And so it's the only obstacle is how fast can CIG hire people. And it's not a matter of, CIG is making more money than they know what to do with. They're doing their best to hire people as fast as possible. That's why they're building another team in Montreal, is in order to, spread their recruiting wings in order to get more people. So, bit of a tangent, but, related to what was said.
Yeah. And like they even just said on the vehicle SCL that right now, if they were to focus on all the cap ships, they could do one a year.
Yeah. Yep.
Like every single cap ship. That's Polaris to Endeavor, but like that needs tech. But like Polaris, the Perseus, the Kraken, Idris is mostly done, Javelin's mostly done.
Mm-hmm.
But like He didn't say like the small cap ships. He said any cap ship. He said all the cap ships they could get 1 year out. So
yeah, it's not a matter of production capacity for getting those ships out. It's a matter of having the gameplay and deciding when is the right time to start working on them so that the ships make sense. And yeah, it sucks. People want their BMM because it was first sold 10 years ago. Totally get it. But that doesn't change
BMM's a
anything.
myth.
Yeah. So yeah, if you haven't watched those episodes or the episode about the vehicle pipeline, if you haven't watched the most recent SCL, I highly encourage you go watch it and watch it critically. The other thing on the progress tracker is they said that the next publish will be starting to add the Q4 2023 schedule, and it's deliverables for the upstream teams. As you know, the progress tracker, along with many other things on the website, imploded, and so that didn't happen. Jake said that they are already working on it, and shouldn't be a problem getting it back up and getting it working. It was something with the way everything imports from their databases or something like that. But they won't be adding the Q4 update until the next roadmap update. And so not this next Wednesday, but the following. I think it's the 14th of June. So release view. With this published, we're toggling the Alpha 319 column to released. The RSI links will remain marked as committed until it's released during Invictus launch week, which we already know. And that is it for the May 17th Roadmap Roundup. So,
Wow, lots of work.
yeah. For the May 31st Roadmap Roundup, and this one is a bit more juicy. We'll read through the little intro as always. Happy Wednesday, or May 31st, 2023, 1 p.m. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the Roadmap Roundup with a brief explanatory note to give you the insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who helped to make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup CIG community team. Notable changes for May 31st, 2023. Release view. Let's scroll down. So this all came out, and then we got the ISC Part 1 from last Thursday with a bunch of info about all the Arena Commander stuff. So, release view. The following cards have been added to the 319, the Alpha 319 column on release view. Mirai, Fury, building, implementing, and balancing Mirai's Snub Fighter, the Fury, as a game-ready vehicle. Mirai Fury MX, building, implementing, and balancing Mirai's Snub Fighter, the Fury, as a game-ready vehicle, the one with the missiles. I haven't actually looked, but I don't think we have the ability, because I know we can't on Progress Tracker, but I don't think we ever figured out which of the unannounced those were on the Progress Tracker before it committed ritual suicide. So we will be in for a surprise come next Roadmap Roundup to find out, okay, what of the unannounced vehicles is the Fury and the MX. So those are moved over to the or put on the release view, and then the following cards have been added to the Alpha 320 column on the release view. And actually, I'm going to open this. Whoops, nope, stop. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay. Arena Commander front-end update. replacement of the current electronic access front end. This makes switching switching modes, vehicles, loadouts, as well as creating lobbies a more fluid experience, as well as giving developers the tools to adjust features and create new ones much more easily. And so this is removing all the flash from the Arena Commander, Star Marine screens. Puppet, good to see you this evening. Thanks for joining us. But this is removing all that flash that is not very performative, and replacing it with the new front end, which I believe is all building blocks, which is going to allow them to make new UI, make better UI, have things work and function more appropriately, but also be able to iterate and add things and change things much more easily. Arena Commander, new racetracks. Test your racing prowess in Euterpe Icebreaker, Miner's Lament, the Snake Pit, and Yadar Valley. So those are the ones that are in the PU now, as some of the first persistent universe locations entering Arena Commander, alongside Halloran Circuit, a brand new racetrack on the New Horizon Speedway. So New Horizon is the one that we already had, but this is a new track at New Horizon, if I'm understanding correctly. I haven't raced in forever, so I'm not in any way, shape, or form well informed about racing in Star Citizen, whether it's in the PU or in Arena Commander. Arena Commander New Horizon Speedway rework. One of Star Citizen's oldest locations gets its Gets its long-awaited update. The 3 Murray Cup racetracks hosted in the New Horizon Speedway have had their tracks improved and location moved to the holiday resort planet Green, the 3rd planet of the Ellis system. And the Ellis system is actually only 2 jumps from Stanton. It's on the other side. You go from Stanton to Magnus, Magnus to Ellis, if I remember correctly. So it could be a PU location that we see in the not-too-distant future. Maybe. Who knows? So they not only did they add all those new racetracks from the PU, as well as a new racetrack at New Horizon, but they also did a big update to the existing racetracks at New Horizon. Arena Commander new dogfighting map, Jericho Station. Stanton's INS Jericho debuts as the newest location for all dogfighting game modes in Arena Commander. This true zero-G open space environment has players face off with few distractions and high performance in the lightest of all our maps. So should be getting very high frames there, and also not have to worry about flying into asteroids and such, or only the single station. So if you are flying around in Arena Commander at Jericho Station and you plow into Jericho Station, the one and only obstacle on the map, you might need to rethink your priorities and whether you want to be a pilot. Arena Commander new elimination map, Echo 11. The FPS map Echo 11, previously exclusive to the game mode Control, has a new variant tailored for elimination. So you'll now be able to play elimination matches at Echo 11. Mike Lansing, I feel attacked. Yeah, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I'm a terrible space pilot. This is why I fly dropships. Get out of the space and down to the ground where it's safe for me. Yeah. And scrolling down some more. Arena Commander new map Security Post Korea. One of the new additions to Arena Commander from the Persistent Universe. Security Post Korea will host all Arena Commander game modes, both FPS and dogfighting, except for Classic Race. So you won't be able to race around Security Post Korea, but you'll be able to play the dogfighting modes as well as the FPS modes at Security Post Korea. So there will be elimination and control at SPK. So I'm really looking forward to ISC this next Thursday, which is where they'll be talking about what used to be Star Marine stuff. So we'll be seeing more about that, and maybe we'll have even more maps. Who knows? Pardon me. Arena Commander. Oh, here we go. Arena Commander new dogfighting map, Winter Circle. Alongside the reworked New Horizon Speedway maps, comes a long-requested atmospheric map for dogmighting modes. Battle in the Earth-like atmosphere above the beautiful planet Green, the third planet of the Ellis system. So, my question regarding this map, because it says dogfighting map, and does that mean that it includes free flight? Because if it includes free flight, that means that I could take my Valkyrie into the Winter Circle map, around Green, and I could practice my hot drops onto the planet through the atmosphere, because that's what I want to be able to practice.
You can get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
you can't get out.
Well, and I don't even have to get out. I just want to be able to come down in and then rapidly. Oh boy, that was a big sneeze. Pardon me.
Oof.
Yeah, oh gosh, I had the video saved. Somebody in the content creation community did a really good tutorial video on it. But it's where you're able to come down, either at a steep angle or straight down, and point your nose at your LZ, where you want to land, and then rapidly change your attitude. So flip down at the end and put your VTOLs down, so that way you're able to rapidly settle, down like that, after coming in screaming hot and fast, and the curve settle into your LZ to really shorten your time to the ground for your troops and avoid anti-aircraft fire. And so that's what I want to be able to practice with the dropship, being able to practice those maneuvers. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to do it, on Green, on that map in free flight. That way you can just practice over and over and over again. Arena Commander experimental game modes. And so I actually just tweeted about this. And once we I finished reading this, I'm going to play a little something, because I want to hear your thoughts. Both in the comments, as well as if you're watching this later on YouTube, leave a comment in the comments below, and I want to hear what you are thinking regarding this, because Nazeris and I have already batted this around a little bit. Arena Commander experimental game modes. And so if you watched ISC, you'll remember that there was like 9 little game mode icons that you could select from in the new Arena Commander front end. And one of the icons was blurred out, and we don't know what it said. And so eagerly anticipating finding out what that said. But they did tell us about the experimental game modes, and these we'll read the description. These limited time game modes range from simple twists on current modes to entirely new modes. And it's this next sentence that's the most important part, so I'm going to read it twice. This initiative will not only allow a rapid iteration of game modes to be put in players' hands faster, but also allow all teams to gather vital analytic data for specific activities, equipment, vehicles, and in-development features. This initiative will not only allow rapid iteration of game modes to be put in players' hands faster, but also allow all teams to gather vital analytic data for specific activities, equipment, vehicles, and in-development features. And now I'm going to pull up a little clip so you can think.
Like, that is like really important. Basically, with all the stuff that's specific locked away in Squadron, they don't have the amount of data they have with all the Star System stuff. So this allows them to just, let's say they need to work on the AI traits that they've been working on. So they'll make a map for it, put in experimental mode, saying like, a situational like defend or something, and they're able to test out the AI there, or hacking, or combined arms. So like it lets them use more of the things they need to test without dedicating it to Star Citizen. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Very excite.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more information about this, because they can get really creative with all sorts of different things, and B, it helps them get the data they need for things a lot easier, rather than, okay, the only data you get is in the PU. And so let's listen to this little clip. This is from CitizenCon 2949 in 2019. And tell me if you think the language is similar.
So, really, why did we build this, right? Well, at some point in the PU, we are going to get to that level of combat going on. Now, you know, that the combat in the PU happens a little more sparsely, and it has to do a little bit with the player counts. But the minute that we put all this stuff together, this better be fun. We can't make it fun after the fact. It's got to be fun before. So it really gives us a really, really solid analytical environment to really hone the gameplay, balance things against each other. So again, how many shots does it take of a railgun to take down an Ursa? How many Ursa shots does it take down to take a Valkyrie? All of these things, they do happen in the PU, but a little more sparsely. And it can take some time. So having said that, when combat occurs, it's really got to be fun. So
Yeah, no, that does sound really similar.
Does the language not sound similar?
Mentioning analytics and things.
Yeah, mentioning analytics and testing out, you know, he mentioned specific scenarios, but they talk about specific activities, equipment, vehicles, and in-development features. They talk about how many shots does it take for, you know, a railgun to kill an Ursa, for an Ursa to kill a Valkyrie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but with the experimental game modes, yeah, they can do combined arms stuff within there and let us test combined arms stuff, you know, like a theaters of war type mode, whatever they want to end up calling it. But they can set up all sorts of different scenarios that aren't just limited to, you know, the combined arms scenario. You know, they talked about later on, it was in the theaters of war. There was like an SCL about it. Like a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two after, I forget when it was, after CitizenCon. And, you know, Sean Tracy talked about, you know, yeah, we could set up, you know, a boarding scenario. We could set up, you know, a capital ship fight with escorts scenario. You know, all these different things. And, well, you know, they were branding that, putting that under the Theaters of War combined arms game mode. But now it's, you know, they're really just talking about experimental game modes, and it doesn't have to be Theaters of War. It doesn't have to be related to combined arms. It can be anything, but it can also include combined arms like Theaters of War. It can also include those other scenarios that Sean Tracy was originally thinking about putting under the Theaters of War game mode. So yeah. I really think that's what the experimental game modes is going to end up being, partly what Theaters of War was meant to be, but also other things on top of that.
Yeah. And also, that was before the whole team really spun up for our main commander feature team. So all the naming of things and how everything was going to filter out got all jostled around.
Yeah, Theaters of War was always a working title. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. They even said that.
Also, Ep also had a really good suggestion. I really hope he said we get to test master modes before they put it in the PU. That depends on when they're planning on putting it in, but I would love to see that as well. Specifically because dying every time you want to turn on Quantum Drive sounds really stupid. There was a thought there that went away. But yeah. I really hope eventually, not anytime soon, but eventually, they have a mode editor that players can use. So that players, specifically orgs, can set up scenarios and run drills in a simulation. Because it's a sim pod. It's a sim pod. It's built for simulations of combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially not only being able to edit the scenario, but maybe being able to edit the map. Like, okay, here are some assets that you can place in a
Rastar
space
exists.
Map. Yeah. Like, okay, sweet. We want to have this station. Just drop it in there in the middle. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, here are a couple of asteroid packs or something like that.
Dude, even just... Okay, let's go full game studio, full tilt, right? Break off Star Citizen Arcade, right? Just call it the Star Citizen Arcade, right? Into its own thing. Make those packs. Make all the things you can add to a thing. Make packs of DLC. Like you can here's like the Stanton pack that you can buy and have all these Stanton locations you can plop in. Asteroid packs, underground packs, like monetize the crap out of it. Do it. Like that works so well.
Hold on, going back to the notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the 2 roadmap roundups. I'm also, before we move on to the ShinyTracker bit, I'm also curious to think about whether, okay, so this is what was added to the release view for 320 for Arena Commander. I wonder if are they going to add more things for Arena Commander that they didn't talk about on this SCL or ISC, but we'll talking about in the next one, for the ground combat or FPS combat aspect of it. Because I hope we see more on that end, because that's more my speed. But as well as what things for the Arena Commander feature team might we see in the Q4 update. I don't remember if they are an upstream or a downstream team, so we're going to have to take a look at that. And so now, I was wondering, is there going to be more added to the 320 for Arena Commander once we get the Part 2 ISC? They talk about that sort of stuff. Like, did they only add the stuff that they talked about, and they're going to add more when we get after this?
Well,
next
they didn't talk about elimination map.
Yeah, they didn't talk. I think there could be more that they talk about, like maybe another game mode or more maps or something, but they don't want to spoil it. I don't know.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe.
But they also.
That sounds like them.
I don't know if. Let's pull it up real quick. We'll just pull up the companion guide and see. Okay, Arena Commander feature team is a downstream team, so they only get their schedule 1 quarter in advance. So we'll just have to keep an eye on them and see if they get any deliverables added, next quarter to their schedule, as well as I wonder if any of those things that were unannounced will change to announced now. We'll just have to, with the next update, we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, the release view for 320 is already shaping up pretty nicely. Lots and lots of gameplay stuff. Not only Arena Commander, but other stuff. And then, of course, there's the whole C. And we'll talk more about that at a later date. But let's get over to ShinyTracker. So because the progress tracker is borked, there weren't really any changes for the scheduled deliverables report or the Delta report for May 17th. And there wasn't anything for May 31st. But what we do have is the new scheduled work timeline. And I'm an idiot and forgot to open this and get it loading, because it does take a second.
But I told you before we started to.
You know I'm bad about taking directions, but I had actually opened it up prior, so maybe it just had it cached or something, because that loaded really quickly.
It does not cache.
Well, it's
by the
already,
way, it only loads
so
in about a page. So,
okay.
So there's a lot of scrolling and a lot of loading to do.
Yeah. So since the progress tracker is dead and waiting to be revived, we're going to have progress tracker Jesus, on the 14th or something, whenever that is. Yeah, Wednesday the 14th. Jake had a very long day when that was going on, because Jake was literally in the middle of moving to a new apartment. No. And then the progress tracker roadmap, amongst other things, with the community, just all caught on fire, and it all caught on fire while Jake like had a sofa and was climbing upstairs with it or something. Yeah, that was
Oh my gosh.
that was Jake's day. So I was joking around about it with Jake. I felt very badly for them. But one good thing is that Shiny Hobo caches or backs up a copy. I don't know how it works. They've explained it to me, but I forgot already. But the new tool that they have is like the progress tracker in that it shows all the different deliverables, but it's searchable, and so you can search for a deliverable. You can break it down by team and only see their teams. You can say, okay, I only want to see things that are for Squadron 42, things that are for Star Citizen, things that are both, things that are being worked on right now. So like the scheduled deliverables report, you can just see things that are being worked on right now. And you can go back based off, because they index it. You can go back and see where things were, what the roadmap looked like, at one point. So like, oh, wait a minute, did something change? And you can see when it changed. But it also breaks down by color whether work is a particular sprint is part-time or full-time work. Like if they're working, for example, right here on Actor Status Tier 2, this sprint right here at the end of March, beginning of April, they had 3 tasks, but they were working, these people were working on this as well as something else during that period. But then when these people were assigned to it from here on out, they were working on it full-time. And so it gives you a much better idea of how much work is being done, and when it is being done, because this will show gaps in the timeline, whereas the progress tracker does not. And it also breaks it down so you'll have 2 bars stacked on top of each other. So the work being done on the additional derelict settlements right here, you can see it's the Montreal Sandbox team. This is their scheduled sprint, their scheduled work. And you can see that they have artists working on tasks and designers working on tasks. So it breaks it down by discipline as well.
And it also, one cannot be overstated, is it breaks it down by task.
Mm-hmm.
All these individual segments are these tasks. And we even, on some of them, see a little gap. Like, for instance, on Cutting Tier 2. Between...
One of my favorite features.
Yeah, between the first task and the second task.
Let me pull it up.
Okay.
And actually, after you're done with that, I'm going to go back up to we're actually going to look at the Squadron ones, because the Squadron ones illustrate a lot of this really well. And it's something that I and Shiny have been talking to Paul about how this stuff has changed in the last year for Squadron. But there you go. Here's Cutting Tier 2.
All right. So first 4. Okay. So on the Spirit, which is right above it, between each of these blocks is a couple days. So the first and second, between the first and second bar on the Cutting Tier 2 is the next day. And then once we get to that big bar, it ends the 30th, and the next task doesn't start till the 5th of the next month. It shows us the gaps in between. And something that I just realized when looking at it, when I started this whole thing, is it shows the different task lengths compared to discipline. So the bottom bar is the weapon feature team engineering, and the bar on top of it is the graphics team engineering. And the graphics team spent longer on each of their 3 tasks than the weapon feature did on all of their little tasks. But even within there, some of the bars are a bit longer. So some of the tasks are a little bit longer than some of the other tasks. And it's just so much information. So good. It's so granular.
Yeah, it's really important that it, being able to break down the bars and show the gaps in work. Because this is another thing that they talked about in SCL last week, that most people who follow Star Citizen have no idea about whatsoever. And I wish we could pull up the progress tracker and like, here's what this looks like on the progress tracker. Here's what this looks like on the schedule, the timeline here, and be able to show these gaps, because John Crew talked about it in SCL. He's like, the progress tracker doesn't show these gaps in work. And so, if somebody is working on something and they work on for a week and then they put it down for a week and work on something else and then they work on it for another week, it shows 3 weeks work, but it's actually 2 different weeks split apart. And that's a small example, but there are lots of things that look like they've been working on forever, when in fact they've got 2 small sprints that, and only a little bit of work. And people, mop and bucket is a meme because people don't understand this at all.
I want a mop. Gosh dang it, give me the ability to mop the floors of my ship. I hate that, I'm the one that, latches onto all these memes for not meme reasons, like the Argo for Best in Show and the Mop and Bucket, give me the what is it called, Pressure Wash Simulator for the outside and Mop and Bucket for the inside.
So for the squadron chapters, here's where we are right now. And then if you were to look at all these chapters that are being worked on, you'll notice that Paul talked about this recently, and Shiny has talked to him about it. I've talked to him about it. Since basically Q2, Q3 last year, there's a lot more full-time work going on the different squadron chapters than part-time work. It used to be a lot more part-time work. You see a lot more orange in the first half of last year going back into 2021. Oops, scroll too far up. Versus in the last 6 months to a year, it's been a lot more green, a lot more full-time work. Does it mean something? Maybe, don't know. But how much work is being done on the different chapters of Squadron 42 has gone up significantly. Shiny says, I was asked...
Wheel back.
What?
Hold control on your keyboard and mouse wheel back.
Oh, I can make it bigger.
Now look at the chapters. Go all the way back. What do I have
There
mine
we
at?
go.
I have mine at 33 right now, and the amount of data I can see is intense.
Yeah. So that gives you a really good representation. Look at all that orange and a lot more green over here from about Q2, Q3 on.
Mm-hmm.
And, not to be too overly hopium about it, but if you remember, at Q2, Q3 is, Q3 really, is when we got the partner development presentation for CitizenCon. And they talked about how they have gotten, it was the update of, hey, all these teams were reprioritized on the Squadron 42 to work on these features along with many others. And now we're finally they talked about how, everybody passed out at that section of CitizenCon. I've watched it 6 or 7 times. But it because it was a lot of talking, but a lot of good information, it just is really difficult to critically listen to because it's Richard Tyrer and Chris Roberts. And they make Nazeris and I look concise. Yeah. And so but what they said is they talked a lot about how, these features, even though sometimes they look rough or they unfinished, they just because they're unpolished doesn't mean they're not in the dev branch. And what they told us is that all of these things that the core gameplay pillar team was moved over to work on are in a state of polishing pretty much for the most part, but they're all in game dev. They're all in the dev branch of Squadron 42, and that the developers are using them in order to finish building the chapters, in order to finish with the gameplay. And so that way, as things are polished, and looking better, well, it's already in the game. they don't have to. They're not being held up by these things anymore, and so they're able to go in and work on these chapters full time and get them polished and get them ready to go. And so could be a little bit of hopium, but it's connecting the dots. It's connecting pieces of information that we have, things that we know in order to paint a picture of what's going on with Squadron. And of course, we know that Squadron was now removed from the store.
And Tyler goes, "No, nothing's going on. Pay no attention to the
Don't look over here.
movement of the store." Yeah.
Yeah. Don't mind
Shiny?
the man behind the curtain. What is the?
You said you were asked about the deliverables for Squadron not going up against the Edge. What was your answer? Oh, arbiter of the third-party timeline. You're basically not Clang. What is it? Kang. You're basically Kang now.
Yeah, don't look at this thing over here. So yeah, if you haven't used the ShinyTracker before or you're unfamiliar with it, just know that this is added to the ShinyTracker.app page. It's up near the top. You can look at this at any time. You can look at here. I'm going to zoom back in so you can see.
I'm just having fun
very
just
small.
staring at the data.
But you can look at what it looked like at every update.
This as a
you can
display.
search for specific deliverables. You can look at just the teams, which is another thing that's really helpful. And you can put these things on and then apply the filters, and it's pretty incredible. I'm not going to lie. I'm a huge fan of this tool. So play around with it. Tell us what you think. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this down on YouTube later, or hit me up on in my Discord or Nazeris' Discord or on Twitter. We want to hear what you think. We want to hear what things you are seeing that maybe we haven't. Information sharing is a good thing. And so the more eyes we have on this information, the better. And that's part of why we do this. And Nazeris, why don't you tell us about your project while I pull it up? Link.
All right. Let me now post it all the places and then get my cat because apparently he wants in. That, and we'll also throw it in Shelly's. There we go. All right. So the first actual release of public viewing, I guess, of the currently WIP monthly report and roadmap index, currently only up to mid 2022. Though
But it's like 2 years worth.
Yeah.
Start.
Starting in 2019. I don't have any of the legend for it yet, so this is kind of early days for it. Starting in mid 2019 and going to mid 2022. This is every subject, every basically tile that would be on the progress tracker or the release view put onto a list and then given a nice little header and definition of what happened to it. So not only can you go open up whatever report you want at the top, you can also see what it said about it on the spreadsheet, see what happened to it on the spreadsheet, and search for when it if it was removed, came back, or different things. So I actually learned just before the opening of the show, if you actually search for something, let's say hacking it and do the find all button, it actually shows you, because of how I labeled each cell, that I can look for maybe hacking delayed or hacking added or the different things that happened with hacking. So because of how I actually labeled it out, you can actually see it and then go to specific times in the hacking process or the lineage of the deliverable. So this is going to I'm going to be using this a lot. I hope it's of benefit to you guys. Currently, like I said, we only have up to mid 2021 roadmap roundups. I will eventually get to the monthly reports and do vaguely the same thing, but it will probably be only by team, not by ship or feature. It'll probably only be by team, which means I need to go and make sure I know every team and put a section for every team when I start. Yeah, but I think it will also be... I have a plan for it. So that is what we got. I'll be hopefully finishing up 2022 relatively soon here. And also, I did get in a lot of the informational ones. So, April 7th was a big one where they introduced the progress tracker. So that I had to figure out some interesting ways of presenting that data. So it ended up being like a double wide, so it looks very, very weird. But post that, I was able to start adding which it was added to, whether it be release view or progress tracker. And currently, because it is WIP, I am still, when I figure out an addition or a way to better present something in a current cell or a current deliverable, I will start adding that. So, for instance, I only started adding which place was added to in the last four columns. So I've added to progress tracker, added to release view. I also have different adding to different release columns. Forget where there was one of these updates. I've just been chewing through these very quickly.
I apologize about the air conditioner right behind me. It is quite loud in my room. It's really great when it goes off in the middle of the night.
So I believe it's May 19th. Has a whole bunch of added to this specific release. You can also go back in time and see the death of 4.0, the original, when they thought they were going to add 4.0 just because they were at 3.9. And they said, haha, maybe we don't do that and we call it 3.10 instead of 4.0. So that's on here. Where is that one? It may have been January 27th, I believe. Yeah, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff getting done, a lot of stuff getting deleted, but you can actually like track everything now. And most importantly, it's all in one spot. So one of the big things that I'm pretty sure Tree has had, but I've had when I'm trying to do something, is to find where it left, where something disappeared.
When was it added? Where did it disappear? Because constantly, like if you miss something, if you miss one update, and you're like, wait a minute, where did it go? And or you just forget, and then you're like, oh, how am I going to find? It's super tedious to go back through, even if you use you look at the com links and you search the com links. Like I've used that, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, it didn't even find for resource management in looking at the monthly reports today and the last few days and stuff. You can go into the com link search section on the RSI website, and I put in resource management, and it didn't find the things that I was looking for. I was like, I know it's been in the monthly reports, and then I just opened up a whole bunch of them, basically every one for the last year, and I found multiple instances of it being mentioned, and it just, for some reason or another, it wasn't finding it, and I was like, okay, well, you have to do this the old-fashioned way, but this is what's going to allow Nazeris and I to search these things and find them much more quickly and efficiently without having to open up 20 different tabs of monthly report or roadmap roundup.
Yeah, and that is like not just to us too, but this is a resource that will be proliferated, just like Darja's ISC segments or the Shiny report. Like this is going to be a community available resource. So it's posted currently in chat, in Paul's Discord and Tree's Discord. I hadn't posted in my Discord yet. I'll get to that soon.
Everything but yours.
Everything but mine, because I forgot mine because
I need to pin it.
Reasons. So, I hope you all enjoy. I hope you actually get use out of it. If you don't get use out of it, then it's failed.
More resources, more information, more better.
Yes. So, Tree? What do you think of it? What do you think of the whole thing?
Oh, I love it. Because that's one of my, because I mean, if you look at like our show notes, so much of our show notes is going back and finding updates on the development of something via monthly reports, and like I'm constantly talking to people and explaining things about the progress tracker and the roadmap, Nazeris and I are probably two of less than 10 people in the world who follow the roadmap and the progress tracker with the level of detail that we do. And, being able to, when people are asking questions, more quickly and easily find the answers to those questions is a good thing. Because the way that I've had to do it before, is a nightmare. And yeah, so like, yeah, it's work in progress, but even if just having the information available and being able to control F things, it saves, every time I have to go searching for something, saves minutes to tens of minutes of me searching and multiple tabs, and makes it a lot also easier to oh, okay, well, I'll just have to go looking for this on my computer when I get home and not being able to find the information what I'm looking for versus, oh, okay, I could pull this up on my phone, and, go find something and then just search through the, okay, this is the entry that I'm looking for hacking, like you're talking about, and that's, and then you've got the links at the top, and or the verbiage is already right there in the cell. So, yeah, I like it.
They were nice enough to actually note in the roadmap roundups. I will learn English someday. When teams were added, so as they worked on the progress tracker and got that updated, they actually did list all the teams. So there is when teams were added.
Mm-hmm.
So we do also have that history.
Okay. Yeah, like Montreal.
Montreal will be up there when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is what I got. I hope you guys enjoy.
Amchuka, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You are not too late. We are just finishing up the Roadmap Roundup portion. We also talked about this new index that Naz is working on for the monthly reports and the Roadmap Roundups to make it those things searchable and more easily, making it more easy to find specific information, just to being able to use the index and Control F for particular things you're looking for. And then we also went over the new ShinyTracker scheduled work timeline, which is the progress tracker on steroids, maybe. What's the Star Citizen equivalent for steroids?
Oh, I don't remember which one it is. You can also figure out how many entries of any given thing there are on the spreadsheet. So, for instance, there's 400 things added, and 400 things, or 400 times they said added, and 167 times they said removed. Most of those are the tiles, but sometimes, like, they said removed, sometimes, like, in the intro paragraph. Which I used to have them as notes, but you can't search within notes in Excel. So I had to go, like, through at least almost a year's worth of the spreadsheet and reconfigure everything to make sure that the intro notes were there, because some of them have searchable things like version numbers or staggered development noted. So, like, you can search up when staggered development started. So I need to make them actual cells and not notes of cells. That was fun, and by fun I mean just terrible. I'm happy with it.
But that's it for this portion. And now we're going to get into the Spectrum Pulse. And let me make sure I've got the right things pulled up. And actually, to make it easier for me on the back end, I'm going to transition us back over to the other screen and then pull the things up. That way you guys don't see all the other stuff. So 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
And all right. And so Nazeris is going to start us off with components. And I'm pulling up the first article, and I should have everything from the notes. So you just tell me. I've got the first two articles pulled up. I've got that video link as well as the things from the Q&A. So just tell me when you want me to scroll down or switch over or something.
Yeah, it's lots of work. So the problem with like going through each of those articles is all of the articles, all of the sites have very varied amount of information. For instance, the first thing I want to do is I want to go through each of the components that we know of and what they do. None of this information, or what's the actual way of saying that? You cannot find all of this information in one spot. Some of it comes from the fan wiki, some of it comes from SC Tools wiki, some of it comes from this engineering post, the shipyard, other posts, Q&As and things. So I pulled this from basically everywhere I could find to get definitions or make up definitions for components that I know what they do. So we're going to quickly run through all of the known components, and then we'll get into what each of these components or what the modifications are that we have in game, such as grade classification things. So we're going to start at the top. Power plants. Easy. Power plants supply the power that the rest of your ship will consume. This is the foundation on which other systems function. These also, I did try and update that. These cost fuel to produce power. So when you fill up your ship with hydrogen, one of the places it goes is the power plant to generate power. Coolers. Coolers are a necessary piece of equipment used on all ships in the Star System universe. Their purpose is to keep the quantum drive from overheating during immediate and long-distance use. Also, other stuff, they cool weapons and power plants, engines and things. So basically, if it has heat, if it generates heat, coolers are used to cool them. And basically, anything that uses power puts out heat. So easy kind of math there. The next one is shields. Shields protect the ship from spaceborne debris and hostile fire. Generators come in multiple sizes and have varying levels of segmentation. Single bubble, front, back, quadrant. I don't know if those still exist, but that's part of the description. On some sites, they also say shield and shield generators are separate. As far as I know, we only have shield generators, the component that is the shield component. I'm pretty sure there's only one type of shield component. Just shields. But some sites have it labeled separately. Fuel tanks or fuel in tanks. Some ships have fuel intakes. Allows you to scoop free hydrogen in the vacuum of space in the extreme upper atmosphere of gas giants to refill your working mass tank. So I believe all Origin ships have a fuel intake, and the Starfarer, if I'm not mistaken, but not all ships do. It is a specialized kind of component. Component's kind of a misnomer for that one because the ship has the support. You can't just put a intake on a ship that doesn't have a spot for it. So technically, it is a component, but it has to be a specialized ship component or fuel intake bay to use it. Fuel tanks. They are components that actually store the hydrogen fuel. There's another one for quantum fuel. So there's fuel and then quantum fuel tanks. These come into account when you start thinking of longer distance ships. They have said in very old posts that these will be switch outable for other things. So basically just avoid areas that you could maybe hide stuff in if you didn't need the fuel to go long distances. Possibly even more armored and whatnot, but most time in what we have right now is just our standard fuel tanks. They just hold the fuel that the ship is balanced with. And we'll talk about balance later. Radars. Radars are used to detect external elements like approaching ships, missiles, or debris. Now this is different from scanners. Scanners are used to scan specific things or areas. So where a radar is a passive, shows you what's around you, scanning is to pull actual data from the environment. So if you're in game and you turn on your actual scanner, you can point at a ship and see who owns it, what components it has, or if you're doing Xenothreat, it tells you how many people are inside it. Radar will not tell you that. It will just say there's a ship there. So, scanners also can be used for finding rocks.
Yeah, they've talked about like scanners for different industry things. Like for mining, if you're collecting gas, different professions. To get the type of information about the environment that you're looking for versus just generic. Scan ship, find info about ship. No, I want to know about that rock. I want to know about that nebula.
Yeah. It won't be every scanner can find all the rocks because that's super annoying. If you're a combat pilot, you don't need to know where the rocks are. So you'll have a fighter military scanner that does not care about the rocks. Yeah. It will not filter rocks or will filter out rocks. And on top of those, you can set filters when radar or scanners are done. You will be able to set filters on your scanners to scan for specific things. So in, let's say, a mole eventually, you'll be able to say, I only want to scan for these quantities of these materials or these materials in rocks. So if it finds that, it can say that rock has it or that rock doesn't. So we are still waiting on, most of these components to actually come to fruition, and we'll talk about why we're still waiting on all these components later on in the show. The next one is quantum drives. The component that allows you to travel at speeds not achievable by just thrusters alone. There is a fake science version of this back in the writer's guide that I didn't really have time to put in here. But basically, it puts your ship into a state that allows it to move through space much quicker than physics would normally allow you. Quantum fuel tanks, same thing as fuel tanks, just for quantum fuel, which is refined quantanium. The jump drive is an addition or an add-on to the quantum drive. Little side lore is it came about because of a broken quantum drive. They found the jump drive thing. So that kind of clamps onto your quantum drive. And I assume at some point those will also be interchangeable, kind of like quantum drives. I don't know that I didn't see anywhere where it said interconnection between the two. Do you have to buy like the same jump drive to your quantum drive, or can you mix and match? I didn't see anywhere where they had anything about that, so have to keep an eye on that. Computers is one of the most convoluted components because it's been called many things and it's had many different definitions over the years. As far as I understand currently, it was formerly called avionics. Avionics motherboards or modules, lots of different things. Sometimes even referred to as just avionics. A computer is a component that will allow you to modify or improve your ship systems by adding additional functionalities. So a computer holds computer blades. Those are not subcomponents, but they are components of components, but not subcomponents. Very confusing, I know. And for those, you have an avionics panel, a blade that you put into the computer, which, yes, you're going to want that, but you also have other slots you can put them in. Some will be empty. So, for instance, the Carrack, even though it has those giant server racks, the actual computer is in the middle of the bottom bridge, and it kind of rises up from the floor. It's much smaller space than those giant 8 server racks. And in those, it's only a medium computer. So you're going to have avionics in there. You're probably going to have a targeting solution in there. So you don't have a lot of space to put other things. So for instance, to slave one turret to the pilot or to make an AI turret, it will take an entire slot for a single turret. It's not going to be all turrets. So you need to pick and choose what functionality you want your ship to have through the very finite amount of computer slots you have. Batteries are a component that most ships will have. Specifically, these functions like real-world batteries that can charge up and use whilst the power plant is offline for both redundant and lower signature performance. So this was something that is not on a lot of the different pages, but I do remember them saying, like, specifically, I'm pretty sure they mentioned it when they were talking about the Steve, but also it was mentioned in the QA for the Ares. But they did say most ships will actually feature some batteries, which will be important, like they said, for stealth, but also making sure you don't die the second your power goes off. Yay. Armor, but that thing that a lot of people are waiting for. This is just additional plating on top of the hull. Hull armor and armor on top of the hull as a component are separate. Armor can take many forms, whether that be just extra metal or specific types of armor. Composite armor or blast armor, kind of like that. Not in game yet, but they have it somewhere in their internal spreadsheets to get done. Life support, something that they are working on now, something that is kind of crucial to today's show. A component that filters the air, generates oxygen, or pours it from tanks. It also is responsible for the temperature control. And I believe we'll be touching more on the temperature control in a later episode. O2 tanks, mentioned just before, place to store oxygen. Not necessarily the main place to get oxygen, but if you're evacuating oxygen from a room, it will need to go into a tank. So, gravity generator. Gravity generators on a ship or can be put on a ship or a station and can be switched on, low power, or off, or low gravity or off. EMP generator generates an electromagnetic pulse or field. And the QED generator generates a quantum enforcement, or is a quantum enforcement device, can quantum entangle, so pull stuff out of quantum or hold stuff from going into quantum. So the Mantis and the Atreus, what is it called? Antares, that one. Both have QED devices.
Oh, yeah, okay, yep.
Thruster. So how all of these sites have these all listed is quite odd, so I'm going to read through what I have. That's thrusters are a key part of a spaceship, crucial for getting around, and also a key area to manage in both fuel consumption and emissions. So you have several types of thrusters. All right, so you have main thrusters, basically the big ones on the back of your ship. There's a primary thrust on the ship that are responsible for making it go forwards. These are the most important ones on traditional constructed ships and provide the bulk of forward momentum. Retro thrusters. Having moved from the maneuvering section of the old matrix, these are now counted in the main thruster category, as they are crucial thrusts set on the ship. There is little point having the bigger thrust round if you can't stop in time. Most ships have that problem. They can get up to speed, but they can't stop. But that's because they don't have retro thrusters. Generally found in pairs, some ships may have more or less depending on their role, and having damaged ones can cause serious issues when trying to stop. VTOL thrusters. These thrusters provide lift in the Z plus axis and can either be fixed in one position or provide continuous upward thrust, or can pivot when needed to provide that thrust to the back. Cargo or particularly ships cargo. Okay, I think it's supposed to be cargo. In particular, ships tend to have fixed VTOL thrusters on the underside if they are required to enter exit planets or moons with gravity to aid them in leaving the atmosphere and to slow their descent. If a ship does not have any dedicated VTOL thrusters, it is not the end of the world. It just requires more forethought under those circumstances mentioned before. So something like the C2 has toggleable VTOLs. The Valkyrie also has toggleable VTOLs that go into main thrust. And the Caterpillar has dedicated VTOLs. It's all under it. Like there's like 20 different VTOLs under the ship. But there are things like the Freelancer that doesn't. So what can you do? You have maneuvering thrusters. So you're only saving grace at that point. So maneuvering thrusters come in two flavors: fixed and gimbal. Fixed maneuvering thrusters provide instant thrust output as they do not need to align to the dedicated or desired vector first. This gives a quicker response, leading to more agility. The downside is you need to have more of them, a minimum of 12 on a ship, to provide the ability to move in any direction with 6 off. Gimbal maneuvering thrusters provide thrust in one or more axes as they pivot to rotate to align themselves to the desired vector before providing thrust. This allows less thrusters to be needed at the cost of slower response rate and smaller amounts of power required to move them into position, making them valuable to power management problems. So that is all the components that I could find, and that's quite a rant of them. I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page on what components we know about. If you guys know any other components, let me know. I'm sure there are some that we missed. These are just the ones that I could come up with over the past week. So, what are some of the things that they've said? So, are there any components that we don't know about? Coffee machines. That's furniture. That goes in the furniture category. It's not component. Okay, so
it's part of the life support system.
Absolutely, I agree. In the shipyard ship items post, there was a question: are there other items that can be swapped out on my ship? And they replied, absolutely. The list here is just the items that are on the ship matrix, or for our example, the ones that we could find. And we have many more in planning or in game, such as scanners, batteries, and armor. We did go over those, but basically there are more items that we have here on the list. For instance, O2 tanks don't really show up anywhere. The only place they show up is when they talk about the resource system. And life support is only mentioned in a couple places, and it doesn't have a description, so I had it right in the description myself. And these only showed up over the past couple years. So, further on in development, even post 1.0, we could see more components being added, more specific. We don't have any of the mining-specific components on this list. So no lasers. We don't have tractor beams up here. Actually, I didn't even put in weapons for some reason. So we don't have any of those. These are mostly, so what we have is all internal. So there's plenty of other types of mounts and things. Are guns components, or are they mount? I don't know. You decide. All right. So let's get into what differentiates an item from the next item down. Starting with grades, and then we'll move on to classification. So every swappable item in the game is assigned a grade for ease of comparison. This should be your first port of call when deciding what items to buy and swap out, as it gives you a simple scale to compare against. Additional details about the individual nature of an item with be variable in the purchase screen will be available. I think that's another typo. They had a lot of typos in these older ones. Will be available in the purchase screen for any vendor. But for a place to start, we provide a simple letter grade. Different grades have different values added to them. Starting from A and moving down, A is best possible performance, usually has an additional sub-item slot. B is a good upgrade to performance, may have an additional item slot, or may have an additional sub-item slot. There we go. C, the standard item for most ships to be default. Sure. Average performance. D, lower grade generally makes up the NPC/AI populace, good for emergency use to get through troubles. So basically, this is your spare, the D grade. When you don't want to spend, the
donut.
high money, your donut, yeah, D for donuts. When you don't want to have $100,000 or 100,000 credit component just sitting around, you just buy a D tier. And if your power plant goes out, you just hit it with a wrench, see if it works. But if not, switch to your donut. Item classifications. So these are going to be what their purposes are. In the future, 3.x patch, we plan to assign every ship and every item a component class. This means players will only be able to put an item of that class into a ship that can utilize it. I don't know how specific that is, because we can definitely mix these up right now in-game. Anyway, the classifications are military, civilian, stealth, industrial, and competition. Military, the best overall at the item's functionality at the expense of emissions and cost. Civilian, most common, wide range of behaviors to suit cost. Options to approximate all other categories, but not as specific. Stealth, vastly reduced signatures and consumption at the expense of functionality. Industrial, reliably high output and low wear, high emissions. Competition, higher performing than military, but at the expense of durability and stealth. Performance over anything. So that kind of gives you what kind of like scenario do you want these to go into. As far as I know, there's not a clamp on what classification you can use with what ship. I've put military grade stuff in not military ships. I don't know what they were talking about in the intro or the little paragraph before it for assigning ships this thing. I've not heard
Either
about
that was something that they changed their minds on, or it's something that they haven't implemented. I don't see them implementing it, but that remains to be seen. Who knows?
Yeah. Frankly, it sounds kind of ridiculous to me. Like, why not? Why put why clamp that down? Like, that seems not redundant. What is it called? There's a word there.
Unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah, basically unnecessary. That's what. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, we have video. We have video now.
Oh, yeah. And so I found this actually looking through my portion, but it's related to Nazeris's, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to save this, and we're going to play this. Just because so as part of the Spectrum Pulse, this is a 2-part Spectrum Pulse, and we're doing the first part tonight. We'll do the next part. I don't know if it'll be the next episode that we do because we have the monthly reports. It'll be the next time we do a Spectrum Pulse, so probably with the next Roadmap Roundup episode.
So we have like the next 3 episodes planned.
Yeah, we for the first time ever, we are planned out like a month in advance. I have another one because I just thought of something else I need to do because I did the science one and I didn't come back for exploration. Yeah. But the one of the concerns that I've seen brought up many times in regards to resource management, engineering, gameplay is everybody's like, oh gosh, it's going to take them forever to go back and rework all these ships to add components to them. And
I mean, they don't help themselves when they say, "Oh, guys, we're finally like updating the freelancer to involve." I don't know why they picked a freelancer to say, "Hey, we're updating it." We've talked about this on the podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
The tech debt portion of the roadmap. There are random ships in there at random times that get updated with these small little things.
All the time.
Like.
All the time.
For some reason, they just have to televise they're doing the freelancer. I don't know why that had to be told.
It's just an example of people latching on to pieces of information and then saying that one thing means something else, and it's like, no, that's not what they said. And there's no reason to believe this from this piece of information. Yeah,
they didn't talk about the Pisces getting updated when the C8R came out. They didn't talk about the MSR getting updated when the C2 came out. And all of these, they keep adding these different things to all these ships. Like, now there's a button to open your Pisces, and you don't have to just walk up to the door. They didn't make a giant announcement. They didn't put that in the progress tracker, updating Pisces. CIG said they are updating the freelancer, so it's just like, why? Just leave that in tech debt. Leave it alone. I don't know why they had to say something about it. Because people get oh, they've said something minute, something's happened. It's like they're just it's touch-ups. It's making sure it stays in line with the current metrics of the game, and by metrics I mean power performance wise. So they're making sure the materials are correct. The whole C is ready to go into the game, so they have a bigger library for MISC. So they can just apply what they have just to the freelancer. It's going to take them a week.
Yeah, whenever we do these things, we not only we try to cover the information about what we know from CIG regarding whatever it is we're talking about. Like, okay, this is how this is intended to work. This is what they've talked about in the past. This is how things have changed, as the game has developed and, they've updated their designs. But we also try to get some information, in order to put context about where certain things are in development. And so when I was looking for information on subcomponents, I accidentally ran into this quote that I'm going to play, related to components and that component work for resource management and, the ships that don't have them, in order to put in a better context of, how much work this actually is and isn't. So we'll play that really quick. Two of the resources for what Nazeris was talking about and reading through, we have a very old engineering doc. If you Google it, and again, all of this is in the show notes that'll be in on the YouTube episode. It's always a Google Doc, but engineering ship component systems talks a lot. This is a good example of where you can go through and you can look at this stuff and you can see how much things have changed and how little things have changed in between this, which was way back in 2013, to this, the shipyard articles in 2017, 4 years later, and 6 years passed from now, to what we have in game right now and what they've been talking about with resource management as of late. And you're like, oh, you know what? The design of these things really has not changed all that much. It has not fluctuated all that much. The overall theme of things is very much the same, with, small changes here and there. And so when people think, oh, everything's subject to change and everything's going to change drastically, and I don't believe any of it until I see it because it could change. And it's like, well, you're being kind of dramatic, because most things are not that way. Most things have little changes. The big cataclysmic changes are very few and far between. So I don't think that mindset is very well founded, because, yeah, those things happen occasionally, but in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't, happen all that often. So let's play this quote. And this is from Star Citizen Live, all about spaceships. This was December 6th, 2019. So 3.5 years ago. And I'm actually going to put on the closed captioning so you can see that, what he's saying.
Question number 2. What can you tell us about the status of implementing physicalized components?
Well, so that's something that we can both talk about. Paul's getting worried he's not going to.
Is it?
Because for a lot of the ships, we deal with a concept point now. Is we have the metrics for all the, the components.
Yes, we do. Yeah. So we have a new concept artist who started with us about 5.5 months ago. So we've been started as a junior, and so we've slowly been running him through the mill, as we say, and so we've been giving him components to look at. I mean, it's a lot better now that we've got actual metrics. Yeah. Everything's better now that we've got metrics, and so it's really just sort of making our way through the massive list of manufacturers that you guys have made for us. Thank you, Will and Dave. And just figuring out what the style guide is, basically, from my side of things.
And then pretty much every ship in the last 2-3 years, concept-wise, has had the placement of them identified at concept. So when the production teams come to them, they're built. You'll have seen it in sort of ships. Sort of Terrapin was the first big one that really went to town with the component hatches, so you could see where they all go. And then everything since then has them, and everything before then it has a plan for where they're going to go. In terms of actually putting the physical items in those places. So this quarter, one of the vehicle teams actually did the preliminary work to be able to place actual items inside the object containers, which can then connect to the vehicles, which gives us the ability to put them in place, and then down the line gives us the ability to shoot them from the outside, do all your physical damage to them. The stopping point has always been, up until now, and still a little bit now, that everything inside an object container can't talk to the vehicle that it's within, which has stopped like Retaliator modules from progressing, because we needed to have the missile launchers inside the object container so that it could all be swapped out with the entire bay. But we've got the groundwork for that now. Next.
So basically, what they said is that from the Terrapin, from basically every ship since 2016. So whether it's released or in concept, but every ship since like mid 2016 has their components. And just because we can't see them, just because the hatch doesn't open, doesn't mean that they're not there. The spot for them is there. The item is there. There may be some artwork in order to make the hatch open up really, and then be able to see the component and physically remove it. But that's not a huge, massive process. There is no, going back and reworking all these ships in order to, they didn't think about that because the component hatch doesn't open, and if it doesn't open, then it isn't there, it doesn't work. No, these things aren't massive art things for them to do. It's not a huge big deal for them to put the new hatch that has functionality. That they built the hatches. And this is an anvil hatch. This is a crusader hatch. What have you. So for them to be able to go back and add those to the ships that don't have them in order to be able to see the physicalized component, and then, the component actually be workable. These aren't massive rework things. This is just a little bit of artwork here and there, from the vehicle content team to be able to do this for all the ships. And that's why, people think, resource management isn't going to be coming for forever because they have to go back and do all the backlog for the gold standard for these ships. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. They've talked about how these are little things that, take them short periods of time, that they do in between sprints, to work on. But the under the hood system of resource management for ships is something that they've been working on for like every ship for a couple of years now. And they basically have refactored everything. We'll talk more about that the next time we get into this. But this is why I think that resource management is coming a lot sooner than we may think, and coming for more ships than we may think, because there's been a lot of statements and updates about the work where people glossed over things that were said that provide very good context for where they actually are with the project. And it isn't just the whole A and the hammerhead. Moving on from components, we're going to move into subcomponents, because that's one thing that we don't have very much information on, and something we don't interact with in game at all right now. You can buy components to upgrade your ship. You can buy weapons. Those things you can change on your ship in order to make it function the way you want, to provide the benefits that you want. If you want to have a more fuel efficient quantum drive or a faster quantum drive, if you want to have a shield with a larger shield health pool or faster regen, there's all these different ways in which you can customize your ship based off of what's important to you. But the plan is to be able to further customize your ship in a lot more ways than we realize with subcomponents. And what I did is I used Starchives.com, and it's something that Nazeris and I use all the time when doing the research for these episodes. So if you're not familiar with Starchives, it's just archives with ST in front of it. .com. It allows you to put in a search for keywords and search all of CIG's videos ever. And basically it searches the transcript from it. Areno EDM says, I have my entire fleet planned around salvaging and upgrading components. Yeah, it's going to be a lucrative business, I think, and that's the kind of salvage I've said it before on the podcast, but that's the gameplay I'm most interested in outside of combat and medical, is finding a derelict and, someone's scraping the hull or you're cutting off pieces, but before that, going over and EVAing and opening up the component lockers and pulling out the components, opening up the ship storage lockers and grabbing the armor and the weapons and stuff, but basically taking anything of value off the ship before you crunch that can. I think that's classic sci-fi space gameplay. It's one of my, and it's something that's always been very gamified, and in Star Citizen, it's going to be very visceral in that, you have to do, the new EVA mechanic. Maybe you'll be able to dock to a derelict, but a lot of times you're going to have to be doing the EVA and, pushing and pulling yourself through, a derelict without gravity in order to do these things. It's going to be challenging and potentially dangerous, but it's going to be also fun and rewarding, because especially like going through the ship of, oh, okay, what components did they have? Did they have any upgrades? And oh, look at what we found. We found a grade A military shield generator, and it's in perfect shape. This is going to be worth a fortune. Or look what I found in these lockers. That's the kind of gameplay I'm interested in. But with subcomponents, oh, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
It took me a second to find it. So since we don't have the progress tracker, thank you, Shiny, again. On the ShinyTracker, and you might not have even been able to see this on the progress tracker, the only team currently working on resource management is the EUPU gameplay. The vehicle content team did have some work to do. That was from October to December. That was the entire vehicle team. Okay, vehicle feature had some, but vehicle content, the people who actually touch the art of the ship, worked for 3 months on resource management. So let's debunk the whole it's going to take them forever. They worked for 3 months and they're not working. So yes, it's a bit of speculation, but they're good. The backlog's good. It's fine.
Yeah, vehicle feature and vehicle content have been doing a lot of work already alongside the gameplay feature team. But there's been a lot of work on resource management over the, here we are in Q2, or no, we're right here, sorry, Q2 2023. Here's the schedule going into Q3. This is gameplay feature, so we'll get that Q4 schedule at the next update. But the work goes back to the very beginning of the progress tracker in January of 2021. And yeah, there's a lot of part-time work, but there's also, here we are, Q2 2022, and here's a lot of,
2022, yeah.
Yeah, here's a lot of full-time work from EU gameplay feature, and then vehicle feature, full-time, and then full-time from vehicle content. So it's
I feel like
it's
somewhere
really
around what was it, Q2 2020, is that what you said? 2022? Yeah, Q2 2022. I feel like there was some mix up in how the management of the company, or 21, whatever it is, whatever the mix up happened, because going through all of the roadmap updates as I build out the spreadsheet, since 2019, they've been, specifically 2021 or 2020, a lot of stuff. It got fast on what they're developing. There's a lot of stuff coming out. It's kicked into high gear, and I don't know if that's just because they finally figured out what they were doing, or they actually got a structure internally that actually lets them actually build the game without basically making it an R&D project and actually having the goals set before them. I don't know what happened, but over the past couple of years, they've really kicked into high gear. Not just with Squadron, but with Star Citizen as well.
Exponential growth too. You can go back. And
that's true. That's true.
And with the funding going up like crazy, they've also hired a crap ton of people in the last 3+ years.
But that wouldn't give part-time to full-time work. That wouldn't necessarily make that transition. That's a priority shift.
Yeah.
So interesting. I'm just happy it's getting done.
Yeah. The subcomponents part is interesting to me because we don't think about, subcomponents right now because we don't generally get to interact with them, but we actually have subcomponents in game already. And people don't realize that the modules on your mining lasers are subcomponents, in that subcomponents are meant to be they're meant to be consumable in nature, in that they have a shorter, they provide a benefit, or they amplify a certain value relative to that component, but they do it for a period of time. Now, the mining modules have a shorter service life. They're supposed to be, I know they've changed, how long they last for since they first came out, but just like with so many other aspects of gameplay in Star Citizen, where mining is really the sort of template for how things are developed and the sort of depth that they're looking for. Well, we have mining modules that are mounted on your different mining lasers in order to amplify, statuses, would that be a word, or effects that you want, or negate ones that you don't, in order to optimize your mining operations, to be able to do what it is you want to do, whether it's break a heavier rock, or break rocks faster, or have less inert material, or if you're not very good at mining, you can make it so that way you take less damage, or something. There's a lot of different statuses that the mining modules allow you to have in order to customize your gameplay and really make it do what it is that you want to do, whether it's just personal preference or it's based around the scenario that you're in, like depending on the type of rock that you're, trying to mine. Well, every component has subcomponents. Cromtac says, "This is timely. I'm in my prospector for the first time after watching several mining videos. I can't wait to get home. I have a mole. I haven't taken it out in over a year and a half. And so I'm looking forward to relearning everything mining with people who know how to do it. Because obviously, if you hang out in my server, I love doing co-op things. And so whether it's combating the bug menace as in Starship Troopers or mining rocks, I want to do it with other people, especially with people who are better at it than me and can show me the ropes. And so I'm really looking forward to trying all the changes that have come out to mining, because it seems from what everybody said, it's in the best place it's ever been, even when people were saying, "Oh, it's in a really good place." Like they put a lot of thought into it. I'm really interested to try it out. But this image that I have on screen is actually from my mouse disappeared. Here. So if you're looking for the original image, not only is it can be in the show notes, but it's in the Shipyard article, Other Items, where they talk about all the components and the grades and stuff. And you can click on it. It's right here. And it's actually a humongous image. It's huge. But if we zoom in, that's how big it is. And that's how much detail there is on these things. And so let's zoom out a little bit. Yeah. But you have to zoom in that much in order to see what the different things that these different components can do. And so they just have a single word. And so it doesn't tell you too much about what they are, but it does give you an idea of the scope of subcomponents. And these are just the subcomponents for things like your power plant, like your shield generator, different things like that. But subcomponents goes a lot further than that, and we'll talk about that when we play a clip that I've made here in a second. But you can see that there are, they have different manufacturers: Sakura Sun, Wilsop, Juno, and then like the B, I guess, is for other brands. I don't know if that's.
Well, I see Artcore.
Is that Artcore? Yeah, there's Artcore.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an Artcore one, but some of them look like Artcore and some of them don't. A lot of them have AC and some of them don't. I think it's all Artcore, but these are just some of the ones that they've concepted. But the energy, so you could say that the energy subcomponent makes it so that it uses that component, the component that it's in uses less energy. Or cooling, requires less cooling to, or stays cooler. So you could use a cooling subcomponent and then overclock that component and it wouldn't overheat. Overrun, don't know what that means. Performance, would probably just generally amplify the base characteristics of that component. Malfunction, reduce the rate of malfunctions. Damage, maybe these are prevent the component or help reduce damage to the component, like from getting getting shot or energy surges and stuff. Kinetic, or maybe kinetic prevents from like kinetic damage, and damage prevents from maybe like relays, overloading. Scan block makes it so, maybe you can't see what those components are. Spectrum block, magna block, info block, impact. Whoops. Not what I meant to do.
Getting so many ideas. I've seen this image like 1,000 times, but as you're going through it.
And then at the top, you can see that they're broken up into, the overall categories. So you have the efficiency modulators, the protection inhibitors, and detection blockers. And these are just examples. There's probably going to be a lot more, but this is what they have made so far. And so this is a pretty cool image. Again, like I said, it's going to be in the show notes. So you can look at it. But what I did
so far as of October 2017.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just for components like shield generators, like your coolers, your power plants, what have you. There is going to be more to that. But we'll get into that video. And this video is about 10 minutes long. But what I did is I went into Starchives and I just searched subcomponents. And I went through every listing from Starchives and watched them all. And I clipped the parts that are most relevant to the conversation, because sometimes they're not even talking about subcomponents. It's subcomponents to like something for mission design, or something like that. But there's different segments that I clipped, and I'll play each one, and I want everybody to listen closely as I play each one. And after each one, we'll talk about what they said and what our thoughts are. We'll circle back at the end. But there's some really key takeaways in these, and I want to see if you guys pick up on some of the things that I picked up on as we're watching this.
That doesn't sound confusing enough.
And repair is going to be tied in with reclaiming quite a bit, because we're going to need these resources that you're gathering.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, and I didn't put text on it because I didn't want it to mess up with the visual of it. But I also, like I said, all this is going to be in the show notes. And so what I did for the show notes is I put, obviously, the link to the original video that this is from, as well as I mentioned the timestamp, and then I copied the transcript and edited it to make it readable. And so this first clip is from the May subscribers town hall featuring the LA design team, May 25th, 2016.
You can also turn on closed captionings. They're auto-generated.
Talking about stripping, the hull off of derelict ships, and you gain those materials to then.
Let's start at the beginning.
That doesn't sound confusing enough.
And repair is going to be tied in with reclaiming quite a bit, because we're going to need these resources that you're gathering. We're talking about stripping, the hull off of derelict ships, and you gain those materials to then craft new components or subcomponents to shove into like a fuse. You'd make a fuse or something. I mean, this is like our design doc right now, so we're not in the implementation phase, but our hope is to have some gameplay where it's really fun to to put these fuses in and like make it work again. Maybe even think like a BioShock mini game or something. I don't know, but like
the pipes.
The pipes. Yeah.
It won't be pipes, but there'll be something. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, the subcomponents are going to be a huge part of that, for also, tuning and adding some character to your individual loadout. So even if we both had the same ship with the exact same manufacturer and line of parts, I could have all of my subcomponents in those parts leaned, if I want to say, focus more on energy cooldowns, making sure all my systems are back up and replenishing faster, where yours may be just raw output, raw performance. You want the biggest number on the power plant output, the biggest number on the shield health output.
We've been looking to have those subcomponents tie directly into the behavior and the performance of that component. So you'll have your base stats that is the item itself, but then when you put the subcomponents in, or you alter out the subcomponents that it already comes outfitted with, that will shift that balance a little bit. Like, you can think of it like those are the points that you can move around on your stat sheet, but you can bolster it a little bit towards this performance or that. Depending on what you need. If you need more durability on this high performance, low durability component, subcomponent might be a good way to do that. They're also the easiest as far as a field repair, because you just remove a thing and put a new thing in.
Yeah.
So that gives you an element of like that consumable for repair.
So there are some key words in there, and this is back in literally 7 years ago. Pardon me. And the first thing that I latched onto is they're talking about how repair is going to be attached to reclaiming. Well, reclaiming is salvaging. And how you will be able to salvage materials and use those salvage materials to craft things. And we already have the first iteration of that. And no, I don't think we're going to be able to, make a pyro multi-tool out of hole scraping material. But I do think that by salvaging materials, from a wreck, you will be able to take those materials, especially after they're sorted, in order to make replacement fuses. Because fuses are the things if you're repairing and maintaining a size 3 shield generator or a power plant, you won't be able to. They just talked about that in the most recent SCL. You won't be able to take that size 3 and above power plant out of your ship. You'll have to do it at a station. But you will be able to repair them, and those power plants or components that size and even lower, but especially in the size 3, size 4 range, what you will be able to do is, as those things take damage, they not the component itself won't initially take damage, but they'll blow fuses. And without those fuses, they have higher risk of taking more damage, higher risk of failing or having impacts to their output. And during to repair that, you can go through and replace the fuses within that power plant to keep it running, or that shield generator. So you not only will have fuses that you replace within the component, but also the subcomponents, which they can become damaged or destroyed more easily. They don't have a long service life like the actual component itself, but they're easily replaceable. In aviation, with helicopters, with my Black Hawk that I ride on all the time, there are line replaceable components, the little small things that are mounted onto the engine that do things on top, do things that help the engine function. And then there's the engine itself. And, you can't field replace the engine. The engine has to be, the aircraft has to go into the hangar, and an actual airframe and power plant technician, has to remove the engine and do a whole tear down and all that sort of stuff, and put in a new jet engine. But my 15 Tangos, my maintainers within the unit, they can replace the different add-ons on the engine, in the accessory module. None of this is classified, I promise. So we're not having a World of Tanks moment right now. But they can do these line replaceable things. And Star Citizen has implemented almost the exact same thing, in that, you can't easily replace the entire component, for a large component, even on a size 2 component, you can't take that out by hand. You have to have a tractor beam to take it out by hand. But you can do the line repairs of replacing the fuses and replacing the modules, and so, or the subcomponents. And so I thought that was really interesting how they talked about 7 years ago how you'd be able to craft fuses in order to repair your components and keep your ship running. And so that to me is probably the lower tiers of crafting, as far as like electronic type things go, that if you're and creates value for those salvaged materials. I think the other parts that were interesting is where they talked about how you can use the subcomponents to take 2 exact same ships with the exact same components. They're all spec'd out with grade A this, competition that, And based off of what your preferences are or what the situation is, you can tune them with subcomponents to do different things. And essentially it's almost like creating a variant. And that's actually something that we're going to talk about in Armchair Admirals and Generals. Sergeant Tickles was a door gunner, and I forget what his full job description is, but he worked on Air Force Pavehawks. I fly in Army Blackhawks. They are very similar aircraft, but because of the different, they have differences in their components and essentially subcomponents, it makes them. They have different performance characteristics, even though they otherwise they largely look utterly the same. It's a real life thing, and it's not just with Blackhawks and Pavehawks. There's lots of different things that do that. And so I thought that it's really interesting that CIG is taking that sort of real world influence and gamifying it with the use of subcomponents within the whole component architecture. And I think that was the only other thing that was in there. But they're already testing this system right now with mining. With the mining laser heads and the mining subcomponents that uses the same under the hood coding and architecture that they're going to use for components and subcomponents as part of the greater resource management system. So it's pretty cool. So let's get into the next part of the clip. And this next part is Star Citizen Reverse the Verse Live, Gameplay Systems and AI from February 16th, 2018.
A follow-up on the mining thing, it says from the live chat, it says, speaking of different things to mine, will we have to swap basic mining tools if we want to extract liquids versus ore versus gas? Are there are we thinking different lasers, different tools, different attachments kind of thing?
Yes, I definitely don't want to have a tool that does it all. Or there might be a tool that does it all, but at very low efficiency.
Okay.
So you will have a tool that, all of our components, all of our items have subcomponents. So you'll be able to configure that laser to whatever you want to achieve.
All right, second question. What about the subcomponents?
So that was a shorter clip, but basically he just, Dan Truffin just reiterated what I was just talking about. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but he was talking about mining lasers, but basically every other component is going to be able to do this, and the mining lasers is really just the first step in this process and the test bed for it. But you're going to be able to take those subcomponents that I showed you, place them in your shield generator, place them in your power plant, and the impact might not be significant, and the impact can stack, but you can basically you could min-max it with 3 of the same thing, or you could have a little bit more diversity. But if you've played any RPG game and you've put runes or gems or whatever onto your shield or your sword in order to add different attributes to it, it's the exact same thing, only for spaceships and the components that they use. And you're basically your spaceship is your character, and your shield generator is your tower shield, and your power plant is your chest plate, and you're able to modify, either add in traits or characteristics, or amplify ones that are already intrinsic to it with subcomponents. So let's get into this next part.
All right, second question. What about the subcomponents for ship weapons and other components?
Again, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce it. This one is from Calling All Devs, Piracy versus Griefing. And this one I thought was really interesting because it talks about something that most people probably aren't aware of at all.
All right, second question. What about the subcomponents for ship weapons and other components? We first heard mention of this a couple weeks ago, actually, that we got our ships, and then we got our components, and now there are going to be subcomponents. So where are we at with the subcomponent system?
Okay, so the ship weapons, that's actually interesting because it's pretty much the other way around. So for the ship weapons, all the components, everything like the asset is ready. Because like we already knew that this was coming up. Like we want the player to be able to swap out specific parts of the weapon, only upgrade the barrel, only upgrade the cooling unit, the firing unit, and so on. So we made our art assets ready to support that. So that actually works for all weapons, I think, released after 3.0, so except the legacy ones. But the system's not there, so you can't yet swap it out, and you can't upgrade specific parts yet, which then has an influence on the weapon. But that's also on our plate and scheduled in the backlog.
Gotcha. So Art anticipated it. Art has been working on it since basically for 2018, since 3.0 came out. Now we just need to do the backlog of all those weapons that came before, and then our design and engineering and programming teams need to get to the building the system that allows the actual switch out.
Pretty much, yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Who caught that? He wasn't just talking about components. He was talking about weapons. So just like your mining laser, is a weapon to smash rocks. Just like we will be able to customize our components, just like how you can customize your mining lasers right now, you'll also be able to customize your weapons. And it isn't just, they just started thinking about this and, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. No, they've been planning on you having the ability to customize weapons for years, since, 2018, in that you'll be the people who are making weapons and have been making weapons since then have been making them from an art standpoint, giving them the ability so that way, building it art-wise, that the barrel could be removable, or the cooling unit could be removable, or maybe if it's a laser, like the focusing lens or something like that. Making it so that way you can swap out the subcomponents of the weapon in order to give it characteristics and change its performance to suit your needs. And so we're not just doing it with mining heads. We're not just doing it with power plants and shield generators. We're doing it with your weapons, your guns. And so you'll be able to customize those as well. And they've already started the artwork on that. And you're talking about the end. So we're waiting on these teams to build the system to do it. That's what they've been doing for the last 2-3 years, is building the system. That's what resource management is, building the system in order to support it. So that way, when you swap out something, it isn't just swapping it out for aesthetics. It changes the characteristics of that item. And so that's what's really exciting is, they talk so much about, with resource management, and, your shields and getting power to your weapons and the relays and all that. But it's also really interesting that, okay, you can get power to your weapons, but you could have customized the barrels on that repeater, in order to make it so that way they're more accurate, or maybe they have longer range, or maybe the, focusing lens creates a higher damage output red dot. So when it hits a ship, it does more damage. All these different things, you could make it so that way it's more resilient to to damage. You could make it so that way you have a larger capacitor pool for ammunition on your energy weapon. All these different things, you can think about all the different ways you customize your mining head, and what sort of things you might be able to do to customize your weapons on top of this. And they've already been planning for it as part of the overall system. And, for, 5-6 years back now, from an art standpoint, they've been building ship weapons to do this, in preparation for the work that's been ongoing for the last 2-3 years with resource management. So it's really cool to think about. This next clip is Reverse the Verse Live, The Shape of Ships, December 7th, 2018.
Moving on to the nose or neck section, cockpit it remains pretty much unchanged at this point.
This is the going through the gray box of the Vanguard with John Crew.
You can see we've put in these component hatches. So these, a sweet little GIF or GIF, depending on where you come from on the internet, shows how they all fold out, so you have access to the items. These are size 2 items, so they're not removable by hand, but what you will be able to interact with them on is opening them up and having subcomponents inside, and these are your sort of booster consumable items that you can customize per item to improve the gameplay of that specific item. So on small ships where they're size 1 items, you can pick them up. Size 0 items, you can pick them up and change them out yourself. 2 and 3, you need to go to a repair station because they are too big to handle by yourself. You might be able to have a little mini tractor beam to get them out, but chances are they're not going to get out the ship. You have to go to a repair station. Size 4 capital items, they're permanently they're a fixture of the ship, so you have to go somewhere specific to get them repaired.
So yeah, very much in line with what we know, what we've been getting updated on recently. But he talked about the being able to you size 0, 1, 2, being able to open up the hatch, change out the subcomponents. They are consumable. They're consumable, and that I don't think your subcomponents for your shield generator or your power plant are going to have the same lifespan that your mining modules are. 20, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever. They'll last longer, but they won't have the same lifespan that the actual component itself has. And that's just like how it is in real life. The different subcomponents in the accessory module, in the main engines on a Blackhawk, those have to be replaced and are line replaced in much shorter hour requirements than the actual engine itself. The different subcomponents of the hydraulic system are the line replaceable units within them are replaced in much shorter hour intervals than the overall hydraulic compressor and motor system itself. It's the same way here we are in Star Citizen, and you can tell that there's probably a lot of aviation buffs within CIG and within the teams that have worked on this over the years, because they've copied a lot of principles from real life aviation aspects of the way aircraft work. So it's pretty cool to think about, and how far back they were thinking about this and how far back they were putting in the work to do these things. And this is the Vanguard from 2018, and they talked about how the Terrapin from 2016 has had this work done. And so when you see a ship that came out around the same time as the Vanguard and the component hatches don't open, just because they don't open, it's a very small amount of work to get the hatch to open, to be able to swap out the or if there isn't a component there, to be able to put one in that's already made and then make it work. That's just artwork. It doesn't, the artwork isn't what makes the system work under the hood. That's the difficult part, the part that they've been working on the past couple of years. Getting the ships up to an art place ready to work with a system that they're already going to have. That's that's not a big ask. So this next part, and I think we've got 2 more. Yeah. Is Inside Star Citizen and Origin Story 3.5 episode 0.5. It's a weird name. May 23rd, 2019. So 4 years ago.
A vehicle in Star Citizen universe isn't just the paint and form you can see from
A Vietnam in Star Citizen universe. Oh, geez.
From the outside, or the amount of cargo and legroom found within. It's all that and the individualized components that will determine much of the performance character for any ship that you call your own. And members of our props team have been working to define that discriminate personality between ship components and their sub-items. And now we've got Joel to show us just a little bit about this process.
Here we have a medium power plant. It's been opened up so you can see the interior and the sub-items within. Something that's quite important for us is that the interiors look and feel like these pieces of machinery that function rather than having these sort of empty boxes that hold sub-items. One of the functions of having an interior is so that you can replace and change about the sub-items within. So we have these mechanisms that open up and display the sub-items in front of the player so you can pull them out and put new ones in. You'll see here from the inside the interior here that the sub-items are quite dense and complex in design, especially when compared to the exteriors. Another thing that's quite important to us is brand identity. So other than the obvious decals with logos on littered about, we want the forms to describe the manufacturer. So in this Aegis one, you've got a lot of flowing shapes, a lot of double chamfers, quite sophisticated, where in contrast you've got lightning power where everything's a bit more utilitarian, there's more function over form sort of stuff going on. So what we've got here is, from an art standpoint, sub-items are finished, and we've got them all lined up here. We've got the manufacturers going along here, and aside each one you'll see a destroyed state. The idea is that over time these become worn and eventually destroyed, hence why you need to replace them. So each one has its own broken variant. So although the gameplay is still being worked on for this, we want the sub-items, the interiors and the ship items to look and feel believable when the player interacts with them, so that this really complements and supports the gameplay when it's ready to come through.
So pretty cool that they've been doing so much of the work for this in advance, even though here we are in 2023, they're still working on the system to support it. Hopefully, I think we'll be seeing it soon. But, years ago, they were working on the art. They've been working on, making it so the components actually open up themselves, having the components themselves have an interior, the working on the actual subcomponents that you'll be able to swap out. It's really cool that they've put this much thought into it in advance of the system actually being in place. And one thing that I thought was, I don't know if a lot of people notice this, but those would look like size 3 and size 2 components. And you could see that the size 3 had 3 subcomponent slots, and the size 2 only had 2 subcomponent slots. And so that suggests, that the larger the component is, the obviously more subcomponents and the more customization, the more modification you can make to them in order to give them greater attributes, potentially with like survivability and output. And so that's, part of the whole factors into the time to kill scenario in giving those the ability to not only repair those components and keep the ship fighting, but also augmenting the characteristics of those components. And so this last section is actually not directly related to the subcomponents themselves, but this part's interesting because it's almost exactly 2 years ago, and they were thinking about things that surround the subcomponents, not just the actual items and replacing them, or replacing them.
So with the engineer, it's more about, they can do everything like...
Sorry, this was from Star Citizen Live, Game Dev, Building NPC Behaviors.
Everybody else, they're, getting changed into whatever the relevant clothes are, or, finding somewhere to sit if they need a rest or things like that. But for the engineer, it's all about maintaining things. Their job is literally to inspect things to see if they're broken, repair things if it's fixed.
It's an archetype.
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
Is that the word?
Yeah, we basically use we call it activities, but yes, it is a sort of an archetype of a job to do. And in essence, I think what is good is that they actually, I think, compared to lots of games where I think with like AI usually tends to do stuff, but it's not really having an impact on anything, right? What we're trying to build is something that, whatever action they do actually has an impact on the game. So what we want to show today is like, imagine we have a wall panel that is split between two different sub elements that we call relay. And this relay can have sub components inside that are probably, like in our test, are fuses. These fuses can actually have gameplay impact, right? And they can break for different reasons. Then you, as a player, can go there and replace it. If the AI does, it has the same exact effect as what the player would do. So, for example, if you hire this guy, and you want him to be your engineer on board of your ship, you can then give him command and say, like, maintain all the wall panels in my ship, or I see in my map that this wall panel is broken. Can you repair exactly this one? And this is how we are building these behaviors, that they are sort of API of interface where you can control them. In essence, it's like designer running a mission are kind of doing the same as a player would do when they give commands to an NPC.
So
they actually went over a lot of terminology there. When Jared said archetype, there's a reason he didn't say yes, because that's not what they call them internally. They call it activities and behaviors. And if you've been following the podcast for any amount of time, you know that behaviors get us very excited. And the engineer behavior has been mostly complete for squadron purposes for a while. And they said verbatim in that video, behaviors are directable by the player. So, anytime we mention behaviors, remember that can be an employee on your ship. And specifically as it goes to this, you can tell them that item or just generally engineering.
Yeah,
very
it's
important terminology.
The gaming analog, and I tweeted about this because I'm actually going to end up writing a video about this. I just have to make the time for it. But I made a tweet to ask, the Star Citizen community, hey, do you like colony management sims or colony sims? And if you do like them, what ones do you play and which ones are your favorite? And a lot of people have said they do like them. They've had some suggestions and such. But if you're paying attention to that little clip, and if you watch the rest of the video, he shows you a demo of the behaviors and the activities that they've created for the NPC to be able to go up to a wall panel and open it up and replace a fuse. And that's the same activity that they'll use to open up a component hatch and replace a subcomponent or a fuse on that component. Basically doing maintenance work on a ship, or not just a ship, a location. It could be maintenance work at a station or your outpost or an underground facility. It's all the exact same thing. But the way that they're designing it, he talked about, you'll be able to tell them, hey, here is your assignment. You are an engineer, and I just want you to be maintaining the, replacing the fuses and subcomponents on my components and on the ship, and basically keeping the ship running at tip top. And if you've watched the resource management videos, you've seen that they are able to basically create a priority list of what components and of the order of components and relays for functionality, so that the way that the ship will triage them. And that would be the same system that the AI would use. Okay, well, we've got these 3 things need to be repaired. This is the first one. Or you can give them a direct order and say, I want you to repair this one specifically because, I'm going to override the priority system where I haven't put it in place. It's the exact same thing that you do in colony management sims. If you play RimWorld, if you play Stranded Alien Dawn, or Space Haven, or any one of these colony management sims where you're basically setting priorities and you're setting priorities for a behavior. And okay, the AI, the NPC will be like, okay, this behavior is number one, this behavior is number two, and using this priority, I'm going to do these activities based off of this priority, from what you've set or what you've built into it. And it's the exact same thing. That's what they're building. And it's cool to me because this is 2 years ago, and they're working on these NPC behaviors and activities, obviously for Squadron, because it's going to be a thing, but also, those same behaviors and activities. That's the reason he spoke about it this way, is so that way they can take those and they don't have to remake them for when we have NPC crew. They're already ready to go. You just have to be able to hire them and assign them to your ship, and then use the API that they've created to say, okay, you are my engineer because I hired you because you have these traits, which again is a colony sim thing. Your colonists have traits and preferences and.
Okay, so now I'm thinking of in Firefly when they picked up Shepherd Book. They would just kind of sit there waiting for passersby to like, hey, we're going this way. What do you offer the crew for your journey over?
Mm-hmm.
Strawberries.
Yeah. 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 And this is the impetus of the video that I'm going to do on resource management, and we're going to talk more about this when we do part 2 of this Spectrum Pulse. But Star Citizen is RimWorld, and RimWorld is Star Citizen when it comes to resource management and engineering. Because so much of this, the way that they're designing these systems is very similar to colony management systems. And, Quantum runs off the resource management system. We're going to talk about that when we get into part 2. And so, Quantum is just a 100,000 colonist strong resource management system, colony sim, which is just nuts to think about. But it's, it's all there, and it's crazy to think that, with the components like Naz was talking about, and the subcomponents like we just talked about, they've been putting in a lot of this work leading up to it.
Wasn't the 100,000 demo only Stanton?
Yeah, just Stanton.
100,000 times 100. 100 star systems. I mean, it won't be 100,000 for every star system, but generally, bad math is 100,000 times 100.
Was that 10 million? You just add 2 zeros.
I can't math in my head. 100,000 times
10 million.
100. 10 million. There you go. 10 million. 10 million quanta. That's bad math because Levski doesn't have that as much traffic as
but
Stanton. But
we're talking about millions of quanta.
Yeah.
In order
Easily
to probably. Yeah. And that's
imagine a city sim with millions of pedestrians, not millions of number that says this is how much your population, but on screen pedestrians doing things I don't know if any of you know SimCity 5 or the SimCity 2015 that they showed every pedestrian in your city. It's that, but lightweight, actually doing things. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. For this first part, the being able to not only Nazeris was talking about, we know that we have the ability to swap out our components, and that's something that people have been complaining about a lot recently because with the wipes and losing the components and weapons that you buy to upgrade your ships. That's a big part of the progression in the game as it stands right now. And so obviously that has a lot of value because people get upset when they lose them and, when they put that effort. And knowing that we're going to be able to even further that level of progression, that level of customization that we obviously put value into right now with subcomponents, and then add on to that with tuning, which we don't have much information on, but you will be able to. We had you used to be able to. I don't know if you can still do it, but you just click a button and overclock your components. Well, that's what tuning is, but it's a permanent thing that you can do as part of what module was that on the Endeavor?
The Sewer Collider.
Yeah, the superclass. You'll be able to tune your components as well. Not just add in subcomponents to them. And so the level of depth for being able to pick the components and weapons, or mining heads or salvage lasers that you want to use, and then buy the manufacturer that you like, at the grade that you want, and then add in the subcomponents that suit your gameplay style or the mission or contract at hand based off what you're mining, what kind of ship you're salvaging, what sort of combat you're going to be getting into. It's a pretty immense level of depth that I think I can't think of any game that's ever gone this far, especially not in the science fiction space sims, and
especially in first person.
Yeah. Oh, and it's coming together right now. Like we are, we're nearing the implementation of resource management, and that's where all of this really comes to a head, where we're going to have a lot more decisions at our fingertips, and a lot more freedom of choice, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, we'll know where we... Hold on. We're waiting on Q4. Where is it? Upstream, right?
Yeah.
We have Q3 upstream.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's underground facilities. That's not the one. There's no work for Q3 in underground facilities. So tinfoil hats.
Oh, isn't that team downstream?
No, all the work currently going on is upstream.
And I already forgot which. This was I forget when they did this sneak peek. But the one I just put on screen, that was a sneak peek from the weekly newsletter, and it was one of the ones in 2021. To show a case carrying subcomponents and a whole bunch of some are broken, some are still good. I thought it was a really cool image, and it shows that they're working on this stuff along with the
EUPU gameplay is the only people currently working on.
Underground facilities.
Resource management.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So underground facilities don't have any work in Q3, and the only work in Q3 for resource management, is EUPU gameplay. So
I need to get the project tracker back up.
I know, right?
I need Q4.
Give us the Q4.
Mm-hmm.
Start foaming at the mouth.
But that's all we have for part 1 of component therapy, this Spectrum Pulse. So stay tuned for part 2. Part 2, let's see. So this Wednesday the 7th, we should have the monthly reports. So we should be doing those next weekend. And then Wednesday the 14th, we should have the next Roadmap Roundup. I get home on the 16th, so I might be kind of occupied that weekend, but sometime that weekend, the following week, we'll get out an episode. We'll do part 2 of this Spectrum Pulse. We'll talk about resource management in depth, because we did everything for the whole thing, and I was like, Naz, if we do this all at once, it's going to be a 4.5 hour episode, so we're splitting it up. So we'll add some more things to it. The next part will be pretty, very juicy as well. But we're going to be talking about the resource management system and engineering gameplay as it relates to components and subcomponents, as well as the next Roadmap Roundup.
Speaking of the speed at which we're getting information right now, July, we're going to start getting the beginning of July, first, let's see, 14th, 28th. So the 12th of July, we're going to start getting the downstream for Q3.
Yep. Yeah, because
it's just there's so much, and that's gonna come with the monthly reports. Oh my god, we're getting there's so much getting done. There's so much data flying our way. Stay tuned if you value your time.
Let's see. So, and that's. Oh, how do I get to it?
Which one?
I've been doing this on my tablet because that's all we have for this evening. So I'm trying to think. We need a suggestion. Chat, if you're still listening, chat, still hanging out with us, can I have a suggestion for a raid? Otherwise, I'm going to pick one. But just want to say thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us this evening. Naz, it's been fun. It's been too long since we did an episode. I don't like having these long breaks. I don't get my fix.
Yeah. But like everything came together, and like we now have like the next 3-4 episodes maybe planned.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got some content. It's moving. Projects are moving forward.
People I follow that are online right now. Marcus the Way is playing Diablo 4. Soul Citizens are on.
Soul Citizens.
Streaming.
Absolutely.
Should we raid Soul Citizens?
Absolutely. They do so much for everyone.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Soul Citizens. All right, starting the raid.
Oh, and I should have the Storm video up this week as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, make sure you post that in my Discord as well once you're done with it. All right, 13 ready to raid, and raiding now.
Bye, everyone. Be kind.
Goodbye. Thanks, everybody.